Okay, in this video, I'm going to go through how to use the Countif function. So I'm looking at this question number 7, and it says use a Countif function that includes both absolute and relative referencing, and I'll explain that in a sec. In cell C7, I'll just highlight C7, to count the number of MD entries in the D code column. Do not count any entries in rows 1 to 13. That's important that you note that so that you get the correct data in there. So let's have a look at the spreadsheet. So we're counting the number of MD entries in the D code column. All right, so it says do not use rows 1 to 13. So I will just shade those so we know not to use those. Okay, so we're not using this. The reason Cambridge has told you this is because there are two decode columns. There's this decode column here and there's this one below it. Okay, so obviously this decode column is where we're looking to count the MD entries, because what Countif does is it will count up cells containing something specific that you tell it to count. So in this case, it's going to count all the MD entries. So if I just go in and I just shade the MD entries, it should count how many of those there are in this particular column. That's how the Countif works. So I'm just going to do that. I should have just used the format painter, but never mind. Yeah, okay, so it should count all of those up. So we're going to put our function in C7. So you can either use the insert function button or you can type the function directly in. I'm just going to use insert function. And as I've told you before, if you can't find the function in the recently used list, just type in the name of it or the part of it and you'll see. So I just typed count and it's brought up all the different functions that would count. So I'll just select the Countif, double click. So there are two parts to the Countif function. We have the range. The range is actually the column of data that we're looking for the item in. So I will highlight from B16 down to B89. Okay. And then the criteria, if I go back up, is MD, but it's not going to be MD from the column that we're looking at. What will happen is if you select MD from here, say you select B22, you're going to get an error message saying that this is a circular reference. That means that you've chosen a cell reference as your criteria that's within the range. They have to be different cells. So in this case, we're going to use B7 because anyway, we're going to be replicating this formula down. And as we've talked about with relative cell referencing, we want our function to, the criteria to change to B8 when it's on row 8, to B9 when it's on row 9. So it looks for each of these different D codes in the same column. Having said that, we need to make this range absolute by pressing F4 on the keyboard and putting the dollar signs in our cell reference like that. That will now ensure that the range, when we copy down our function, doesn't change, but we want the criteria to change and remain relative. And as you can see, Excel's counted up the number of MDs there. So there's 16 within this range. So I'll just press OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy that by moving my cursor till it becomes a black cross in the bottom right hand corner and double click. And that's now copied down. So again, as I've shown you in previous videos, if we look at the function, yeah, so this one, the range has stayed the same, B16 to B89, but the criteria is now B8. If I click on the next one, the criteria is B9 and then B10 and so on. So that's what Cambridge mean when they say that you must include both absolute and relative referencing. Yeah, so you've got to make sure you've done that. So that's how you would use the Countif.